And broadcasting and podcasting 438 miles between each other. It's your favorite two guys back on the airwaves. It's the Fifth Quarter Podcast. George Koff and Desmond McLaughlin with you from College Station in Lubbock. Man, it feels like an eternity since we were back with an episode for you in March. It's been 6 months now, and we are finally graced with some beautiful sports, football, basketball, hockey, you name it. It's all back on our TVs, and I love it. Glad to have you with us as we dive into season number 3, if you can believe it. This is our 3rd year of this, and Desmond, good time to welcome you in. What are you thinking right now? 3rd year of doing this, and it almost was just a joke, at least at first.
Man, I can't believe it. I mean, it just seems like yesterday you messaged me on Snapchat with this idea of like, hey, what if we did like a weekly podcast of sports? And I was like, yeah, it'd be pretty fun, not knowing how far to go in just 3 years. It seems like, it really does seem like less than a year ago that we started all this, I don't know if it's because COVID, messing with time or just time flying by, but that's crazy.
Yeah, probably a little bit of both if we're going to be honest with COVID,
Right.
messing with your perception of time and just, maybe just it being 3 years. You think of all the guests we've had a lot of our mutual joint friends and my friends and our good ESPN buddies, Sam Kahn, Ben Baby, Mike Cousins, who joined us last episode. I think the sky's the limit for us. And I can tell you season 3, we're going to have a lot in store for you. We've got some guests that we hope to try to bring on the show and get some perspectives there and really make things a little interesting. So I guess, Desmond, without further ado, you ready to get into this? Get into episode.
I think it's really exciting that this is our first face-to-face video that we're doing online.
Exactly.
I love it.
Retweet on that.
Maybe let some people get our faces to our names a little bit.
Exactly. George Koff here on your right, Desmond on your left, and that brings up a very good point. We are now available wherever you can get your podcasts. I can't believe I'm actually saying that. We were previously at the end of season 2, but now we truly are. Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Play Podcasts. Anywhere you get your podcast, you should be able to find us. Just look for the Fifth Quarter Podcast, all spelled out, and look for the blue little circle with the A&M. And
don't forget to share and like.
Exactly. And then on YouTube, we'll still be on YouTube, and you'll get, if you're watching this on YouTube, you're seeing our faces. If not, I encourage you to go subscribe and like our YouTube so you can see us in the video version of this podcast you're listening to. And without further ado, we're going to get started. So I guess the best way to get started is, since March, what has happened so far? It's been 6 months. Well, we went from having basically a regular season to then no season to then conferences saying, well, we're going to play this many games and we're going to be altering our schedule. If you remember, the ACC at one point said we're only going to play conference schedule. Now, to catch you up to speed, the ACC, the Atlantic Coast Conference, that's Clemson, Boston College, has added Notre Dame into their conference. They are not playing independent this year. They will be playing as a member of the ACC with the opportunity to go to the conference championship and win an ACC title. We'll get to that in a second on how crazy that is. It'd be their first ever conference title if Notre Dame can do it. They will be playing 10 conference games and 1 non-conference as long as the game is hosted in the state of the ACC institution. So Notre Dame can play, I believe they're playing South Florida, and they're hosting that game. The SEC had tried to get on the same page as the ACC. Of course, you have a lot of rivalries there, Florida State, Florida, Louisville, Kentucky, just to name 2 of them, Clemson, South Carolina, to name another one. And they have decided that they will only go to a 10-game conference only, which added 2 new opponents to each team's schedule. And finally, the Big 12 has decided at the very end, almost like a, hey, ACC, SEC, don't forget about me. I'm tagging along too. They will play a 9-1 schedule. So 9 conference games, which is normal for the Big 12. Play everybody at least once, and then they'll play a non-conference game as long as it, again, is hosted by the institution in the Big 12 at their stadium. What does this mean for the Big 10 and the Pac-12? Well, they will be playing supposedly spring seasons. That could change here soon, depending on what happens, but we won't get into much on that as we don't have enough information. We maybe touch on that next week or in the weeks following, depending on what ends up happening. However, they will not be playing a fall season, which brings up the question about college football integrity. Obviously, if you don't have the Ohio States, the Oregons, the Penn State, the Michigans of the world, of the college football world, what does that mean for the top 25? Are we really ranking the best top 25 teams in the country? Or are we really just ranking what we have to rank? So we're going to get into that here in a second. So Desmond, ACC, SEC, Big 12 playing. That's a total of, I believe, somewhere around the 30 ballpark of 30 teams. Most likely that's probably going to be the teams that make up the top 25.
Without that.
So I'd like to hear your opinion or your take on this. If we're talking about a 0-2 Boston College being in the top 25 at number 25, just for example, do you really think that people are going to say, oh, the top 25 means something, or are we just going to kind of write it off?
I think, well, they're always going to have top 25, and of course, they're only going to use the teams that are playing. So I don't think they're really going to take into context. I think they're just going to focus on the top 10 teams, the teams that really actually stand a chance, Alabama, LSU, Clemson, all those teams. I think once you get to the 15 to 25, it gets a little hazy. You'll see a bunch of teams that you usually don't see just because we are losing a lot of good teams. I was looking at some of the schools that they're losing, Penn State, Michigan, Ohio State, Wisconsin. These are all teams that compete to go for the top 10 spots. And with them out, you're going to see a lot of other teams try to get the advantage. And if they really wanted this is the year to do it. If Texas Tech wants to end in top 25, this is the year to do it.
Absolutely. And you mentioned to that front, six Big Ten teams were ranked in the preseason top 25. And in case you're wondering, the AP has decided for their preseason poll, they will rank teams the entire college football FBS Division I universe. Once we begin play, they will only rank teams that are currently playing or are scheduled to play. So
you said six teams, George? That's about what? Almost about 25% of the top 25 teams are already out.
As well as if you include the Pac-12, which is three teams as well.
Exactly.
So you're already looking at over almost 50% of the pool.
That's insane.
So if we look at the top 10, for example, of the top 10, Ohio State, Penn State, Oregon are the three teams in the top 10 that are not playing. Everyone else is playing. So that's Clemson in this order: Clemson, Bama, Georgia, Oklahoma, LSU, Florida, and Notre Dame. But like you said, Desmond, those are probably going to stay consistent, and they probably would have stayed consistent anyway, without Oregon and Ohio State and Penn State. But you're right, the 10 to 25 is going to be a scramble. It's going to be very much like, we might even for once we might actually see like SMU ranked weekly, not just last year where they had a miraculous season to get ranked. Like we may actually see SMU ranked at a position where, they're number 16 for the season.
Because if we're being honest, George, lately, usually the Final Four teams are usually the same teams. You're going to get Alabama, Clemson. You might get another SEC team,
Oklahoma,
or a Big 12 team. But usually it's Ohio State or, Penn State usually there sometimes. So they're not really losing much in the college football playoffs. They're just losing one spot because usually two are usually for SEC or the other one's for Big 12. And then you're always most likely to have Clemson in there, of course.
Right. So, yeah, you're not going to necessarily have maybe a newcomer to that. You could theoretically, because of the way that the schedules are going to play out. We're going to get to the SEC schedule in a minute. When you're playing when every game for the SEC, for example, when every game matters, you don't get any cupcakes, you don't get any non-conference. Every single of the 10 games matters. You're going to play harder. You're going to see some teams maybe play differently. Like look at Vanderbilt, for example. Vanderbilt, they're normally 3-9, right? 2-10, 3-9, and those wins are normally out of conference because they schedule like UNLV or Western Michigan or whoever have you, small schools that they know they can probably get a win. But when you take those away, you're looking at a winless season for Vanderbilt.
Win the season, exactly.
Or you're looking at an opportunity to play spoiler and maybe beat like Tennessee or South Carolina or Missouri, a team that maybe is not great in the SEC, but certainly you can contend with. So it makes it for a very interesting, opportunity. And so many questions about with the Big Ten and the Pac-12. If they play a spring season, does that mean the NFL draft is going to get pushed back? Does that mean the combine is going to get pushed back? Does that mean that you're going to see a bunch of draft eligible players opt out of playing those seasons just so they can be ready for the draft? Or we're already seeing opting out right now because of the coronavirus, or just because of feeling like that they don't need to play another season and they just want to go. Like, look at Jamar Chase from LSU. He said that he felt like he wants to prepare for the draft, not necessarily anything COVID related. He just felt like he's ready to prepare for the draft, and he thinks that this season basically isn't worth it. So in a situation like that, where in order to be draft eligible, you have to be in your third year out from the time you graduated high school. That doesn't necessarily mean you have to be playing your third year of college football. You just have to be 3 years out removed from graduating high school. So so if you were redshirted, it means that when you're a sophomore, you can be eligible, or if you're a true junior, you're eligible, something like that. So really, really interesting. What comes out of all this? Does this mean, NCAA has already announced that everyone has a free year of eligibility if you're a fall sport player. So all these college football athletes, they're already going to get, we're already, theoretically, we could see Kellen Mond one more year for the Aggies. Or Alan Bowman, who's literally gone all over the place. We could see him again for Texas Tech, which would be a lifesaver for Texas Tech because quarterback position's kind of been off and on. And, for Houston, or for now Miami, sorry, I keep forgetting D.R. King transferred to Miami. That transfer year basically is nothing because he's going to get that back in the form of being able to play again at Miami. So, I think it's a little bit of an interesting position that college football is being put in. I'm not saying that college football is going to be derailed by this, but it really is going to change that dynamic that we know from college football, where every year it changes because you're going to have starters that leave, and it kind of changes who's going to be at the top of the college football world at the end of the season, not necessarily at the beginning, but and as you go through. So I think it'd be really interesting. Speaking of interesting and just kind of dynamic, let's go into A&M, Texas Tech, and the Houston Cougar football. Let's start at the top with Texas A&M. Texas A&M, 10-game SEC schedule. Obviously this year, many around the program and many of the former students in the Texas A&M fan base thought this was the year. With Abilene Christian, Colorado, Fresno State, and North Texas as your non-conference opponents on the schedule. Very simple, very easy. Replaces guys like Clemson on the schedule. You get Vanderbilt instead of Georgia in the SEC slate. You're thinking 10-0, 10-1 going into the final, or 10-0, 9-1 going into LSU, Alabama to end the season. And instead, now you've got Vanderbilt, Auburn, Florida, Alabama, Tennessee and Florida being the two additions. So Desmond, what is your takeaway? Obviously, A&M fans are not very happy with the new schedule because you felt like that there was probably lots of potential with the old one. But now you have to look at this new one. 5 home, 5 away games, assuming we get them all played. What's your takeaway?
I mean, I looked at the A&M schedule. Not going to lie, George. It's going to be a tough season. I projected them to win 6-4.
Okay.
But I'm not going to lie. Some of those wins, I was very iffy about. I was like, they have to play tremendous to win these games. But I mean, when you're just playing conference games in the SEC, it's hard. SEC is the hardest conference to play in college football. It could take a toll on players. And then Kellen Mond's going to he's experienced, yes, but he's going to have to keep improving. And then I saw online that you already have a couple players opting out for the season, James Foster and your cornerback, Elijah Blades. Do you think maybe more will start to opt out?
Well, as well as Cameron Buckley too. Cameron Buckley, receiver, he's not opting out. He tore his ACL some practice. So
That's a
he's
tough
out
injury
for
to
the
come back
season.
from.
So yeah, so it definitely and from what I've heard from the football team, this is not going to be the end. There's going to be more just because of things happening. A lot of them probably will be health related from what
Mm-hmm.
that, from that idea. Again, A&M plays their first game against Vanderbilt. We are 25 days away. We are officially in the month of September, which means today, September 1st, marks the first day of the month that we will have SEC football, which first off is very exciting, but it also means that we're, less than 3 weeks away from having football. Lots can happen in 3 weeks, especially as we've seen during the COVID. A lot can happen in 3 weeks. Immediately, and I'll show it to the camera. Immediately, I wrote down the A&M schedule as it was being released. 2 games, only 2, I circled immediately. Alabama, week 2 on the road, followed by Florida at home at Kyle Field. Back-to-back weeks, back-to-back big games. Now, many could say, oh, well, what about LSU and Auburn to end the season? Yeah. But those don't matter if you don't focus on the beginning of the season. Playing Vanderbilt is probably the best opportunity that A&M could have gotten prior to Alabama. Because let's be honest, you could have a bye before Alabama, and that's great. Look at what happened last year. A&M really didn't do – we scored a touchdown, 7-0, and then Bama goes on a 28 unanswered points or whatever exactly. I can't remember exactly what it was, but you get the point. It doesn't really – having a bye before Alabama doesn't work. Having a team where you're going to have to play probably until the third quarter. Sorry, Vanderbilt. Love you guys. Beautiful school, beautiful campus. You just don't have a football team that's going to be competing. And that's the honest opinion, okay? If I was in your shoes, I'd say the same thing about Vanderbilt, okay? Or, if I was a Vanderbilt student, I'd probably be saying the same thing. Vanderbilt, traditionally, football is not something that they're strong in. Would you agree, Desmond?
I agree.
Okay.
I still think A&M will get the first win of the season.
Okay. So we're in agreement here. I was going to say, you're kind of looking at me like, okay, George, where are you going with this? Trust me, I have a point. Vanderbilt, I think, poses the best opportunity for A&M to get their questions answered. How is the O-line going to play? How is your defense going to play? With all these opting out, how is your secondary going to look depth-wise? How is your run game going to be positioned? Anaya Smith, he was the running back for the bowl game. He looked really good in the bowl game. Jimbo Fisher has said that he will be one of the primary running backs, him and Isaiah Spiller in the backfield for the Aggies. So, I'm curious to see how that's going to work out. And, of course, the big one is your play caller, Kellen Mond. What is he going to do in his senior season? Is he over the offseason? Has he grown as a leader? Is he going to, you have all these questions surrounding the team. Vanderbilt allows you to play where you probably will win and get those questions answered ahead of playing probably the best team or second best team in the SEC, if we're going to count Georgia or Florida as one of the better teams in the SEC. I think it also poses a very good test, too, because that back-to-back, Bama and Florida, whatever you didn't do well against Bama, you're going to be able to correct fairly quickly against Florida. And because it's at home, you don't necessarily have to worry about traveling, which I think is going to be a bigger thing than we think for this year, because supposedly they're going to be traveling either the very night before or the day of, depending on where it is. So that could lead to not fresh legs. You don't know. So yeah, I think being at home after that very tough away game against Bama kind of allows it to maybe see where that happens. I have the Aggies going between 8-2 and 7-3. Here's the thing about 7-3. I really think that between Florida, if you look at the big swing games or the games the Aggies probably need to win, Bama, Florida, LSU, Auburn, and we'll throw Tennessee in there because Florida and Tennessee being the 2 teams that you added to the schedule. I think A&M can split Alabama and Florida. I think we can go 1-1 theoretically. I think that's pretty, there for the taking. Between LSU and Auburn, seeing what LSU looks like right now. I don't know if you've seen this, Desmond. They currently only have 5. Okay, and I'm not making this up. 5 returning starters from their national championship team in January. 5. That gives me a lot of confidence in beating a young team like that. A&M has 16 starters from their Texas Bowl team, from the team last year. They returned 16 starters, and that includes people who have opted out and who have – it might be 14 or close, 15 or 14, depending on exact numbers, but it's pretty close to that. That gives me a lot of leadership potential and buying into the Aggies versus the LSU. I think the toughest game, if everything goes around, will be that last game, and it's Auburn. Auburn would be coming off of the Iron Bowl against Alabama, which means they're going to be winded. They're going to be well-tested. It's going to be a very interesting game, and Jordan Hare could decide, depending on how things play out, could decide second or even first place in the SEC West. It's not unreasonable to think that could be the game that could decide things. So 8-2, 7-3. If it's 8-2, I have losses to Alabama and to Auburn. If it's 7-3, Alabama, Auburn, and possibly a trap game like Mississippi State or Ole Miss with a new coach you don't know. So I think it'll be really interesting to see how that all plays out. Let's flip the switch to Desmond. Texas Tech football, 9-1. Only playing 10 games this season. I feel like actually gives Matt Wells and his squad a little bit of hope. You've got Bowman coming back. What's your thoughts?
I was very displeased, at least, with Coach Wells' decisions last year. As you know, George, the play calls he had, the decisions he made in the fourth quarter, they upset me. I think Alan Bowman coming back is huge. I don't know if you remember about 2 years ago, Alan Bowman was in the Heisman race for pretty much most of the season until he started having injuries. If Alan Bowman stays healthy, that's a big thing because he's had injury problems all throughout the last 2 years, which does not really help. I mean, Jet Duffy was not bad, but he's not our quarterback. You know what I'm saying? He has a different play style.
Right.
I think if he stays healthy, it'll help a lot. Now, they did lose Henry and Thompson. Both are running backs. But we did add all Pac-12 linebacker Colin Schooler, which will help out with our defense. And I don't know if you heard, but Coach Wells actually scrutinized a little bit because despite having 21 cases of COVID throughout the Lubbock area, he's been practicing them hard almost every single day. So hopefully these practices that are very, unprofessional, hopefully they will do some good throughout the season. I have us going 5-5 season. I was thinking maybe 6-4, but I think if I honestly, as a fan, I wouldn't even go for hoping to get in the top 4 college football players. I think my hope would be finishing in the top 3 of the Big 12, or at least getting in top 25. I think that would be a solid goal for us to set us up for next year. I used to have hopes of a breakout season. I just don't see it yet. But I think if we compete in the Big 12 in top 3, it will really set them up for future teams along the way. Because Coach Wells is still young. He's still, second, third season with us. So he still has a lot of work to do.
Wait, second or third season? I thought he got hired last year, so this would be season.
Yeah, second season, my fault.
Okay, yeah, but you're right. He's a very.
He's still new to the team. He did bring a little baggage with him.
Correct. He's still a young coach. He's still a young coach, though. He's still young. That's the point. I'm actually going to agree with you, Desmond. I'm actually going to go with a 6-4 or 5-5 season as well.
Yeah.
Looking at the schedule, it kind of sets up very favorably the previous Big 12 schedule part of the Big 12. The previous part of the schedule that was Big 12 play for the Red Raiders, if I get all my words out right there, was not very well set up. But the way that when they've redefined it and kind of played with it, having Texas or kind of getting out your big road trips at the beginning of the season, it definitely helps. The longest road trip you have to make is to Iowa State. Okay.
Which that was one of the games I was very iffy because Iowa State, as we said, is one of those teams where you don't know who's going to show up.
Right. But if you look at the very end of the season, The last four trips or last four games, you leave the state of Texas once, and that's to Oklahoma State, which to Lubbock from Lubbock is not really that big of a
Not very
trip.
far. Yeah.
So and it's TCU, Baylor, Oklahoma State, and Kansas. If Texas Tech can't go 3-1 or 2-2 on that
Exactly.
part of the schedule, then I don't know. Then there's obviously something wrong. Bowman got hurt, or we didn't play that part of the season. You get the gist there.
And what makes me mad is that last year we competed against these teams. I don't know if you remember, for sure, last year was the year in Baylor when there was that missed call.
Fumble, yes.
The missed call. But we were competing in the game, and Baylor was a top team last year. See, we can compete against these teams. It's the last. That missed call was not Coach Wells' fault, of course, but just a lot of games that we had that were close were just terrible play call decisions. Running it on like 3rd and 19. Like, why would you do that?
Yeah, no, it's hard fought. It was bad play, time management and play management by Coach Wells, but it still put the team with a chance to even
of winning, exactly,
compete and contend. But I think you're right. 5-5, 6-4. This team is not going to go to the college football playoff, even right now, even in a season where there's only 74 FBS teams playing. But certainly they're going to, if we have a bowl game, they're going to go to a decent bowl game, and they're going to be able to at least not be the Vanderbilt or the Kansases or the West Virginias of the world. Like, they're going to be upper, if we're going to split college football this year into 3 tiers, they're not going to be in the 3rd tier. They're going to be second, maybe mid, or maybe low 1st tier. So, I think there's a lot to hope on for Texas Tech. Mm-hmm. I think you hit it right on the head. There's a lot of frustration, and hopefully maybe that will be, spur some, I don't know how to say this, results in a good way. Like, that frustration might help provide a opportunity to play well and to have like a meaning, a reason to play. So we'll see what happens there. Again, their first game is next week. We'll talk about Texas Tech football quite a bit next week because they'll be ready to play on September 12th against Houston Baptist, which will play their first game this week. So we'll be able to talk about exactly how Houston Baptist is going to look against that Red Raider squad. And finally, our third team that we're going to focus on this year, just for the sake of consistency, I know, is the Houston Cougars. Houston, Dana Holgerson and his team and his staff last year did not really have Houston in a good position. We had Sam Kahn on that week that Derek King and half the Houston roster was like, deuces, I'm leaving, I'm transferring.
Yeah.
It was what? Houston was 1-4, I think, at that point, or 2.
Yeah, they had not got off to a great start.
No, they didn't, and that was one of the things that the NCAA, I'm going back a little bit, why the NCAA put in this rule about eligibility, because they didn't want the position to be like, oh well, if our team's 1-3, forget it, I'm just going to opt out because of COVID. Like, no, you're going to opt out because you are doing bad and there's no more opportunity to play well, right? So I think it will be really interesting now how Houston regroups, refocuses. There's a lot of good players still on that roster, and they got a lot of recruits, a lot of guys from the Houston area. That was one thing that they actually did pretty well, that Dana Holgerson and his staff did this offseason, or like between seasons, was to go out and get that local area recruit that was not going to be found by Bama, A&M, Texas, LSU, that type, Georgia, that type of deal. They're trying to find the recruits that they want to Houston. And they get BYU. BYU's been in a very tough spot this year because they're an independent trying to basically reform their schedule in a matter of a month. But Houston and BYU in Provo, Utah, that's in October. That should be a very good game. Very good game. Based on how we see BYU come out and play and Houston. So, and of course, UCF, I believe they get UCF at home this year. Houston.
Yeah.
And, I'm looking at a 5-5 season. Part of it's just because of the way that it plays out. they still have Navy on the schedule, SMU, Memphis, a lot of teams that could go either way, like swing games that could go either way. Um, but I really do think the Houston Cougars, this as if Dana Holgerson can really hone in and figure out his team and get them in a position where they want to play, this Houston team is going to be nasty in 21 and 22. They're going to be absolutely nasty. You're not going to want to face them because they're going to be in that position like UCF, like Memphis, like Navy, with a chance to keep winning American Conference championships over and over and over. That's how strongly I feel about Dana Holgerson, Coach Holgerson, doing everything he can to get that team where it needs to be. Anything you wanted to add, Desmond?
No, George. I think honestly, you hit on exactly what I was going to say. The local recruits. I was going to give a shout out to my boy Chidozie. He played at Foster High School, which is kind of near me. Man's massive, great D line. He committed to U of H, so hopefully I can get down there to watch a couple of games, or see him on TV. But that's honestly that in my opinion, that's a great signing. I actually agreed with you about the projection about 5-5. There are a couple of games, like North Texas, teams that they lost their starting quarterback. You don't know how they're going to do, but they do have a whole new system. They have new coaches, new schemes. So we'll just have to. The record might fluctuate between how other teams adapt. But they did lose Derek King, and I told you when I saw Derek King play against Texas Tech, I was like, I really like this dude. He's not really a flashy name, but he's a solid quarterback. So that week when I was upset that he just dipped in Houston like that, that's really gonna hurt him because he's a great player to lose.
Yeah, and Miami, obviously you look at it one way, but look at the other side. Miami is getting a great leader, a great quarterback, a great passer, a great runner. I think we forget how
I'm
good
not trying to knock on
the
other guy.
Absolutely not.
Just losing somebody like that, it hurts. It hurts.
It hurts because it hurts your mentality of your program too. If guys are just
exactly
like, I'm leaving, why are you leaving? That's what the question is posed.
They could have lost some potential recruits. Like they were thinking about it. They're like, wait, what's going on? Their best player wants to leave. Like something must be going on there. Then they don't want to sign there no more.
Yeah, and so then it starts to bring up, it starts to really, start to ask questions you don't necessarily want to know the answer to, because then it's a very interesting dynamics.
Same thing with it's just same thing like with DeAndre. Like out of nowhere, just traded. Like with something going in the locker room, something going on. It's just situations like those.
Yep, DeAndre Hopkins again. Yeah, like you're mentioning with getting traded for David Johnson. Thank you. Yes. I try to forget that trade out of my brain because
we all do. Trust you, George. Trust me.
I mean, but we'll see. Hey, they play in 9 days. We'll see what happens. We'll see what happens against the world champion Kansas City Chiefs, which leads us into the next segment and our final one before we pick some games here. Talking about professional sports and the quote unquote bubble that's been created in the last few months. So for those of you that are not aware, the NBA has decided to play out the rest of their regular season, or 8 games, and then the playoffs at Disney World, which was very much of a success to begin with, and still is. Their playoffs, first and second rounds are first round is almost done, second round are underway. No positive tests from what. Supposedly, no positive tests. You could always have a false negative or something. But seriously, I think at this point, it's pretty safe to say that the bubbles work. Not to mention, I know, Desmond, we don't talk about it much, but the NHL has done not just one, but 2 bubbles. The Western Conference bubbling in Edmonton, Alberta, in Canada, and then the Eastern Conference in Toronto, in Ontario. And so everything's been well. They actually started the same week as the NBA. So those are working. So it begs the question, before we get into the NBA bubble, MLB is considering a postseason bubble. Maybe the NFL should consider a postseason bubble. If it shows that it works, what's there to say that it should, or shouldn't? What do you think?
Well, I think definitely, secluding all the players from the outside world, of course, it's going to help at least a little bit. And what I'm going to say, I don't want to sound rude or anything, but I mean, these are the main goal for professional sports, of course, is to give us entertainment.
Right.
But really, the main goal is the money. So let's just say that, in NBA, someone like LeBron James catches COVID-19. Do you really think that they're going to report it? I mean, let's be honest. Let's be honest. He shows no symptoms at all. He can go along and no one will even know. Do you really think that? I'm not saying this. Do you really think they're going to report it?
I mean,
losing the money, the season. Nah.
You bring up a very good point, but also didn't they take all these measures into place that like they can't keep that contained, that if the person does get COVID that they
George, but come on. Let's not lie. This is NBA is not bad, but the NFL is worse. They're good with going behind the scenes, getting stuff done.
Didn't Zeke get the coronavirus and then it was like 3 days later, oh, he's fine?
Exactly, right? Like what happens if someone does catch COVID-19? What happens? Because technically he has to quarantine. Technically, everyone he's been around has to be quarantined. Do you really think that they're going to quarantine the whole team and the teams that he played against a day ago or so? No, you just got to be very careful. I'm happy to hear that apparently there's been no positive COVID-19 test, but something's gonna go down.
So let me ask this question, Desmond. Are you opposed of the bubble being
No,
used?
I'm not opposed to it, because that would be whether those stuff would happen whether the season was in the bubble or not. Because if people get tested before the games, but as I said, the bubble helps. Instead of them being able to go everywhere, exposing other people, they're just contained within themselves. So of course it's going to help a little bit. They're basically in their own little quarantine just with all the other NFL players. So if something did happen, it would just be to them instead of it breaking out everywhere else.
Right.
And I think, again, also with MLB, I think it's a lot easier because they have smaller teams. Not enough people will go as, NFL will bring all the defensive coordinators, offensive coordinators, trainers, workout coordinator. You know what I'm saying? It'll be a lot easier with the MLB.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's what they're considering. Nothing is finalized, but yeah, you're right. They could say that there's no positive tests and there maybe is to maybe a star player, but they're containing it or they're just trying. But yes, you're right. It's all about money. Everything's about the money. Let's be honest. Everything is about the money. What did Jerry Maguire say? Show me the money. Like, yeah, it's gonna be all about the money when you come back to it. It's a flat sports. You mentioned it. Entertainment. It's a flat circle. It can't happen without money, and money's gonna be, it's flat circle and cycle. It can't happen without money, and money's
like with the Black Lives Matter protests that was going on with the NBA. Situations like these have occurred before, but it took them a while to fully address it. A couple of teams have worn shirts before, but then the players sat out a playoff game. Well, that just blew the league into a frenzy. They're losing money. So what they do? The next day they met with the NBA Players Association and got everything under control. And of course, the NBA players are back to playing, but the next day they lost money and they lost viewers the next day. That just shows you what they can do.
So Desmond, let me ask this question though. Weren't the Lakers and the Clippers, didn't they both say that they didn't want to resume?
They both, which is what I felt surprising, because I'm not I was hating on LeBron a little bit because I didn't want this. I don't know if you know, I have not watched a single NBA playoff game because I made a deal with all my friends. I said I didn't agree with the NBA playoffs going on. I said, why are we trying so hard to do COVID-19, but then we're going to allow all these players to go back and play as if everything was normal? And then this was also when the George Floyd stuff was going on. I was like, we need to be focusing our attention on this.
Right.
I feel like the NBA is just a distraction to get us away from it. So I said, I'm not watching any playoffs. I'll look at the highlights. I'll read the stats, read the news, but I'm not going to watch a game. And I've stuck to it so far. I have to watch the YouTube highlights, the full game highlights. on House of Highlights, but I haven't watched the game. And I don't know, man. Everything that's been going on, it's just been hard. And LeBron in the beginning of the team, he was like, "Oh no, we're playing." After Kyrie and his own teammate Dwight Howard was never running a championship ring. This would be his first ring. Was like, "I'm not gonna play." And LeBron's like, "Oh, I'm definitely playing." And I'm also not gonna be wearing. I'm wearing my own name. So I was like, "Okay, LeBron." But then he made a decision after he's on track to win another ring. He was like, "I'm not gonna play anymore." I had some respect for him for that. I was like, all the other teams who have less, because let's be honest, the Lakers are they're favorites to win.
Oh,
They
absolutely.
lost the first game against Portland, but just blew them out the next games. And then LeBron's like, "Hey, I'm gonna take a back seat. I'm not gonna play." While he's chasing Michael Jordan, I was like, wow. And then apparently he stormed out the meeting.
Oh,
I had some respect for him. And then he made a couple of tweets in here. He's been bashed for them, but he's trying to make a statement. He's trying.
yeah, but it took him so long to make that statement. That is it still?
Well,
a
I think
statement?
he got fed up. He's like, I think I don't know how to say it.
No, but I get what you're saying. I think I know where you're going with this. But go ahead.
Like, I think before he was like, "Yeah, it's a problem," but back in his mind, you're always a little selfish in the back of your mind. He's like, "I need this ring," but then everything happened again. He's like, "Okay, this is enough. We need to shut it down now." But usually the people they usually get what they want, and they did. And I'm half happy that the playoffs are resumed, but the other half of me was like, "This is big." I was like, players are fine sitting out. And I know a lot of people are like, "Oh, NBA players get paid enough. Why are they being spoiled?" And other people are like, there are people there in the NBA that don't get paid a lot, and they need this money to feed their kids. I understand that, but like, let's not lie. They get paid well. They get paid well to if they sat out a couple games or sat out the rest of the playoffs. Only 7 teams left. They'd be fine. You know what I'm saying?
Right. And I saw an article that was one of the guys who's like in support of LeBron. And then he's like, "I do not like LeBron. Just be quiet. Look, you have enough money that you could take a week off, or you could end the season right now and you'd be perfectly fine."
Exactly.
If I go, and he was like, "If I go into the protest and I somehow injure myself or whatever, I don't have enough money to pay for insurance, to pay for like medical bills, and to put food on the table for my kids, for my children, for my wife." And because so LeBron, be quiet, because even though you're making a statement, like whatever exactly you're saying doesn't necessarily doesn't necessarily ring true with everybody on that same side.
But that's why they have the NBA Players Association, to talk to people like that, talk with the teams, get a consensus. You know what I'm saying?
And I'm not saying that that was what I was saying. I saw this in an article, and it was a guy.
Yeah, no, I understand. Yeah.
But I think from my perspective, I've never seen. We saw the sports world completely stop because of coronavirus, right, in March.
Right.
But then, 6 or just about 5 months later, we saw the sports world stop again, but for a bigger cause. And it begs the question, why didn't this happen previously? And obviously you can say that about a lot of things why didn't to this nature happen previously? And many of the reasons is because the NBA players didn't have all the balls in their court. They had maybe a few, but not all. They held all the reasoning for the bubble to continue in Orlando. Not the owners, not the presidents, not Commissioner Adam Silver. The players do. And so when they had that meeting, when they boycotted the games, when they stopped, when they reflected, and they had the NBA PA meeting come together, and Chris Paul, who I believe is the president of the Players Association for the NBA, and they came together and they said, "We're going to play still. We're going to take a break, but we're for another day, and then we're going to play." They had the way to stop everything. Like, I don't know if you were paying attention, Desmond, because obviously you say the NBA bubble, you're kind of not been watching all the games and stuff, but not just in NBA did stop. The NHL took a break. The MLB postponed multiple games. Not the MLB postponed. Teams in the MLB postponed their games because they made a statement. The WNBA, which we keep forgetting about in this entire time, has been starting all these protests. They were the ones that started the Black Lives Matter, at least in the sports impact. They were the ones that kind of pushed first to put the things on the back, the social justice phrases on the back of their jerseys, and then the NBA followed suit. They're the ones that wore shirts to not vote against their owner. Their owner, one of the guy voted, and they said, and they wore a different shirt that basically was criticizing the owner, their own team. Like the WNBA is making a statement, NBA is making a statement, all these leagues making a statement, and it's just something that's so powerful to see. And whether or not you're in agreement of it being good or bad, you have to admit, whichever side you're on, they are making a difference, and they are doing it in the way that they can, which is stopping, reflecting, and then moving forward. Because
I think it's big. Just like hopefully whoever's watching this on YouTube, I don't care what color you are. Everyone needs to realize, whether it's politics, religion, Black Lives Matter, anything, everyone has their own opinion. You may not like it, you may agree with it, but I don't think we should. I'm tired of seeing news videos of people just bashing each other based off their opinions. You're not going to agree with everything everyone says. People are going to come at you. You just got to shake it off. And if you're in that situation where you get pulled over, just comply with the officer. Absolutely. He might be racist, might rough you up a little bit. Take it to court, man. Just don't put yourself in a position where something you do could be turned against you. That's what I'm trying to say. Just comply with it, fight it in court. You'll get your justice. But if you put yourself in a position to where it can be turned against yourself, it's not going to end well.
Every voice matters. Every opinion matters, and it counts. And I think that will probably be a message that we continue to keep moving forward here as we go into season 3. This is something that's pretty big. It's something that's going to be around the sports world for the next, eternity. To be honest, it's going to be around for a while, because it's going to be, I feel like as a kid, you're looking up, your role models are the athletes, especially if you're a sports related person, are the athletes. You're going to look up to them, and if they're doing what's right, then you're going to want to do what's right. If they're making a statement and voice, and doing everything they can to do what's right, you're going to want to do that, and it's going to force change. It's going to help change happen. So I think we'll leave the discussion at that, unless you want to add any final thoughts, Desmond.
No, man, that's good.
Yeah, and we'll keep moving forward here, so we don't take up too much of your time here as you listen to the podcast or watch it. We have some games to pick, and boy, I didn't think those words would come out of my mouth anytime soon, but they have, and it's nice. And it's not NBA, it's not NFL, it's not any of that. It's actually college football. Boy, is it glad to be able to pick some college football games. So we're going to do the gauntlet here. We're going to run through them as pretty efficiently and as quick as we can as we get out of here, and so you guys can enjoy your first week of September. So with that being said, our normal segment of our sneaky good game, the one that is a pretty close line of spread, odds, we will debut that next week. We have more games. The problem was we didn't have enough close games to pick here to put one of those in our arsenal. So we will hold off on that. We still both have picked an upset, so the upset watch is back for the 3rd year. And Desmond, let me add, we need to get better at picking our upset.
I
always
pick George. You know me, George. I always pick big. My apologies.
Yeah, you got to pick big, but you also have to pick like conservative too. Like you got to be. I believe we're like 400. I think we're our percentage, like our winning percentage on getting the upsets right, are like either 385 or 400, which is bad. I feel like it should be closer to 500, but we'll see. And we'll start with the first 7 games of the year. First off, South Alabama, Southern Miss. It's our first FBS on FBS game of the year. It's on Thursday on CBS Sports Network at 8 p.m. Central Time from Hattiesburg, Mississippi. It's a Southern Miss and the Golden Eagles. They are 14-point favorites in a game where South Alabama has really just tried to find. They're going to be trying. They still have tried to find their footing at the FBS level. They were FCS for a good 20 years. They came up about 2-3 years ago. They're still trying to figure things out. I think Southern Miss keeps it close, or South Alabama keeps it close, but Southern Miss does just enough. I got them 24-20 is my score. Golden Eagles taking it over the Jaguars. Desmond, what about you?
Well, George, I agree. I just think they're Gophers gonna win this one 24-19.
Yeah, it's gonna be close. It's gonna be close. I think should be a good one to start the official FBS Division I season. For those of you, let me mention this. For those of you that are probably going to disagree with me, Austin Peay and Central Arkansas on Saturday was a wonderful thing to watch because it was actually college football, but that was FCS. That's the lower level of Division I. And so technically this is the first FBS game between two teams. So it'd be a very good one to watch and be able to have that back on our television screens. Eastern Kentucky and Marshall, first game on Saturday. Saturday college football. The Colonels take on the Thundering Herd in West Virginia, which is where Marshall was. I don't know if you knew that, Desmond. Marshall is in West Virginia.
Actually didn't know that.
Yeah, so Marshall, West Virginia are actually rivals, which is weird, but regardless, there are going to be a ton of FCS teams. There's about 15 of them playing this year in the fall, even though the FCS, they've moved their championships to the spring. There are a lot of teams that are still playing fall ball because they've been allowed to, or, they chose to. And Eastern Kentucky is one of those schools. They might contend, but Marshall's going to win this one by at least 25. 45-17 is my score. What about you, Desmond?
We are Marshall. I agree. Marshall, they actually had the second best defense.
Wow.
In the conference USA last year. I have them winning 17-10. I think that because I was reading our Eastern Kentucky mostly as a running game, and with that defense, I think with the second best defense last year, I think they can contain them. And then they'll have the new quarterback Grant Wells coming in. And I'm gonna say this. I feel like this year, new quarterbacks are gonna have a great start. I don't know why. I have this gut feeling that all new quarterbacks are just gonna go off. It'll be the first game. Everybody's kind of excited. They've been waiting for the chance all year. Not sure if they'll get their start. I have a really good feeling that they're all gonna just go off this year.
Desmond's spitting out facts.
Well, hey, we'll have to see. You know me.
We'll see. But he might be onto something there with I believe of the 79 teams in the FBS that are playing in the fall, I want to say a good 30 or so are debuting a new quarterback.
New quarterback's right. Yeah, they lost a lot this year.
Yeah, we had a big quarterback class go to the NFL. But, of course, returners like Trevor Lawrence, Justin Fields, who won't play this fall.
Trevor, Sam Ehlinger.
Yes, this is true. Sam Ehlinger and the Kellen Mond.
Oh, my gosh.
But, yeah. So, speaking of a quarterback that did leave, Mason Fine, he leaves his North Texas Mean Green in a tough spot against Houston Baptist, another FCS team. They will play in Denton on Saturday night. Should be a good one. Obviously, you mentioned it, Desmond. New quarterbacks might be something to look at. North Texas is going to be trying to find their footing, their offensive footing, that is. I still think they do enough. Houston Baptist has struggled since they got to the Division I level. I mean, I don't want to say that they're a bad team. It's just North Texas can be just enough, just better. I think this is going to be a rout. This is actually what the spread says. I've got UNT beating HBU 37-7. Yeah, and that's the spread. The spread is 30 points, I believe. So
I knew this wasn't gonna be. I knew this wasn't gonna be a game when I saw it. I mean, I know Mason Fine left, and North Texas struggled a little bit last year. But I mean, a couple of years ago, this is a completely different team. I just want to think about this. Remember, a couple of years ago, George, they were your underdog team, correct?
They were. I had
they were just blowing teams out the water.
They were.
But I have them win this game 38. I'm gonna say 13.
Okay.
They have, as I told you, they have a new quarterback. They have a new offensive and defensive coordinator. In that they actually reported they have a whole new offensive line and defensive scheme to come to play. So hopefully, this whole new system that they have in North Texas.
Ooh, I like that from the Mean Green, eh?
They're changing. I mean, you lose Mason Fine and you have a struggled season. I hope some change are coming. I wish Texas Tech could do the same thing, but hey, hopefully they'll come hungry to play. I think they get this easy dub against Houston Baptist.
Yeah, Graham Harrell was their offensive coordinator, and he left for USC, I believe. And
Yeah.
head coach Seth Luttrell, hopefully he'll be able to get something done. So we'll see what happens. All right, we moved to the game that's probably one of the ones to watch out for, just because of just kind of there's a lot of intrigue with it. SMU and Texas State. Now, you may not think there's a lot of intrigue now when you look at the rest of the college football schedule for Saturday. This is probably one that really pops out. SMU, obviously, they've had some ups and downs. Last year was probably their best season to date in a very long time, since the 1970s or 80s, probably, something close to that. And Texas State. Texas State has not been not been a great program. Jake Spavital got absolutely rocked last year at Kyle Field to start the season. I believe it was 47-7 was the final, something along those lines. It was not good. It was a bad loss, and never really found their identity as a team. The Bobcats, they really weren't on the same page after that. So I think this game is going to be really important for both squads. SMU has a tough rest of they play North Texas and TCU. TCU SMU is going to be a very good game. I want to put that out there right now. We'll talk about it next week, but that would be a very good game. And I think SMU needs some ride momentum into that game if they want to have a chance against TCU. TCU is going to be scarier than people think. And I think SMU gets it done this week, sets up a very interesting game against the Horned Frogs next week. I have the Mustangs beating the Bobcats by 3. Be very close, but by 3, 33-30. Watch out.
I had a blowout, George. No disrespect, because I know I do have a good amount of friends. Texas State, my cousin's also a Texas State cheerleader. I don't see Texas State as a threat at all against any team, man. 41-17 SMU. I know that.
Gosh.
Hey, George. I know SMU did lose both their running backs, but they are coming off, as you said, a fantastic year. I believe they went like 10-3, something like that.
I believe so. I believe it was
a fantastic year, George. I think that they'll carry on. I think they'll bring the momentum. Shane Buechele, the former Texas quarterback, second year there at SMU. Hopefully he has more experience with them now, comes out with that same fire that he had. I think it's going to be a blowout. I will say I like what you said about TCU, because TCU is one of those teams that play Tech where I was unsure. I was like, do
exactly.
I give Tech the win? Do I give TCU the win? We beat them one year, we lose them another year. What's going to happen?
Yeah, absolutely. And to fact check you, Desmond, yes, SMU did go 10-3 last year. I believe their 3 losses were the Memphis, Navy, and in their bowl game to FAU. So,
which aren't bad games. They probably should beat FAU, but other games.
It was a bowl game. It was a bowl game.
Yeah.
Keep in mind, bowl game. You're not going to be motivated if you're playing in Boca Raton, where you feel like you should have gotten to like the Cotton Bowl or something like that.
Right.
So I think it should be a good one. I really do. And that SMU TCU game, if there's one reason to come back next week and listen to Desmond and I chat, it's to listen to our analysis about that game. That game, I kid you not, that game is probably going to be the best non-conference game of the Big 12 season. Go look at the rest. Louisiana Tech Baylor might be really intriguing, but the rest of the teams that they play, it's like Tulsa, Oklahoma State, Arkansas State, Kansas State, Texas, UTEP. Like, no, that's not going to be interesting. But TCU, SMU, oh, absolutely. If College Game Day is still doing what they're doing, I don't know if they're going to. They should be going to that game, because that game is – and it got moved to Friday. I don't know if you heard that, Desmond. It's a Friday night game. in Fort Worth. Can you too bad crowds are going to be limited because that would be
I was gonna say
an
that's pretty
electric
close to
crowd.
both teams right there. That's a
Battle for the Iron Skillet is the rivalry that they play for.
battle for the DFW.
Yeah, we'll talk more about that. Seriously, you guys want to tune into that because we will talk a lot about that next week, and I'll tell you the story of why it's called the Battle for the Iron Skillet. So we're gonna move here quickly. SFA, Stephen F. Austin, and UTEP. UTEP not been very good. Their last 3 seasons, 1-11, 1-11, and 0-12, with the dramatic look. Yeah, they're gonna go 1 in however many games they play this year, or 0 and how many. I don't even know how many games they play, but that's how bad UTEP has been. They get a win against Stephen F. Austin, but again, it's if they lose, I won't be surprised. If they win, I might actually be more surprised if they lose.
Damn.
UTEP 24, SFA 13. Desmond, please save me here.
I agree, George. UTEP 35, SFA 24. I just want to say that this is actually the first game that UTEP has been projected to win since last year's season opener.
Oh my gosh.
That they're projected to win.
See,
and it wasn't even by much.
Yeah, it's like what, 6 points or something?
Yeah, something like that.
It's crazy. Yeah.
I found that funny.
Yeah, no, they beat HBU was their last win, in case you were wondering, the one that Desmond's referencing. They beat HBU 36-34. HBU, which we just talked about of struggling in Division 1. 36-34. Desmond, if there's a reason why I'm going to watch this SFA UTEP game, it's because I want to see how close the score is going to get. Could be in for a pretty good one, especially on the return to college football weekend. I mean,
right.
And if you want to watch that, it's 8 p.m. On ESPN3, not ESPN Plus, so it's for free. ESPN3 from El Paso in the Sun Bowl. All right, 2 games left here with Arkansas State and Memphis. To be honest, Arkansas State's been pretty solid the last few years. They're always a team that will compete in the Sun Belt, but Memphis is just that
too good.
Better. Memphis, as we were referring to earlier with SMU, Memphis went 12-2 last year. They lost in the Cotton Bowl after their coach left. Keep in mind, Mark Norvell went to Florida State. I think they're still going to make a statement. They're going to show that with the new head coach, even without their head coach that took them to the promised land and made them really successful, that they can still compete. I have Memphis winning 41-20.
I agree, George. Memphis 39, Arkansas State 17. I was going to mention as well. Yep, Coach Norvell. It's the first game without him since he moved to Florida State. And also Brady White is back. He finished 5th in yards per. Yeah, he finished 5th in yards per attempt, and they look to defend the American title. I think they're going to start off strong this year.
Yep, and prime time on ESPN, 7 p.m. kickoff from the Liberty Bowl Memorial Stadium. If you are curious and you'd like to watch, 15.5-point favorites for the Tigers. And finally, the game we've probably both been staring at for the last 2 weeks since it was scheduled, BYU and Navy. Labor Day Monday, 7 p.m., ESPN, from Annapolis, Maryland, with no fans. I want to point that out. No fans. Navy's not allowing any fans. Let's talk about this for a second. Navy was supposed to play Notre Dame in Dublin, Ireland to start the season. College game day was going to be there. It was going to be all fun and games, exciting, and then Corona hit. And they stopped that game. And then they were going to play in Navy. And then ACC was like, nah, you can't do that. The non-conference game's got to be in Notre Dame. And Navy was like, no, we don't want to play in Notre Dame. So Notre Dame's like, okay, well then bye-bye, off we go from your schedule. And Navy was like, hello, BYU? Yeah, you're losing games, right? Let's play. Okay, perfect. See you on week 1. So BYU have now agreed to play. It's probably not – I probably simplified that way too much, but BYU and Navy are playing. Independence, being an independent hurt the Cougars, like we mentioned. They're having to create a game in basically, a schedule in basically a month, a whole new schedule. And they will play well this year. They will have defend the triple option, as we had an interruption there, have defend the triple option, and they'll play good enough. I have them in my first upset of the year. BYU in overtime, 2-point underdog, 43-40. Desmond, save me here. What do you got?
Wow, George, you even called the quarter. I agree. I think we said this before the game. BYU 13, Navy 10. I definitely think it's going to come down to the wire. Navy did lose Mason Perry, which is huge. And I also read that this will be the most watched game for BYU since they went independent.
Whoa! Wait! Say that again.
Most watched games since they went independent.
Wow!
All eyes on them. The pressure is high for them.
Wow! Yeah, and
I think
you know what's going to happen?
They're definitely going to want to make an impression.
You know what's going to happen? All these eyes are going to be on them, and they're going to shock the world. Amen. That's what's going to happen.
Thank you, George. Thank you.
For once, we might actually get our upset right. Now, for those of you saying it might not be an upset, let's clarify. Navy came in an hour before we started recording as a 2-point favorite. As we started recording, BYU, it switched lines to them being the 2-point favorite. Now, you might say, George, Desmond, why are you guys picking the favorite and calling it an upset? Well, you know what? It's an upset to us. BYU
and Navy had a better record. Come on.
Yeah, BYU is the little dog in the fight. Sometimes you have to go for the little dog in the fight.
Exactly.
Big dog can't eat all the time. Let the little dog eat. Let the little dog eat. As I stumble over in laughter, we're going to call it quits for this episode in the season 3 premiere. If you're wondering what our small school is going to be, we've got to let things figure out who's playing and who doesn't get corona. We'll tell you by week 3. We'll have one. But for us here at the Fifth Quarter Podcast, remember you can follow us on Twitter at the 5Q Podcast, on Instagram, same account, the 5Q Podcast, and you can give us an email at the q5podcast@gmail.com if you want some feedback. We'd love some feedback on our first video podcast, and remember you can listen to us on Spotify, Apple Music, or Apple Podcast, or anywhere you can get your podcast. And you're, of course, finding us on YouTube here if you're watching this video. Don't forget to like, subscribe, hit the bell, ring the bell so you can get notified anytime we upload a video. I sound like the normal YouTube content creator now, but for my colleague in Lubbock, he's Desmond McLaughlin. I am George Koff, signing off for the Fifth Quarter Podcast. We'll catch you next week. Adios, Gig'em Aggies, and Rec and Tech.